Brae, it's so lovely to see you and to have you again. The last time we were together, you mentioned the importance of thinking about learning styles. And then you talked a little bit about this diagnosis of ADHD that you had. How did ADHD affect you in college?
Well, so to answer that question at first, I'll be honest, I didn't even know much about ADHD at first. It was definitely a little bit, I would say, taboo in our culture. It's associated with being lazy or, as an excuse, right? But also not only that, it was also associated with being, labeling people of color, that they as a culture we thought prohibited their success, right? So I didn't even think to look up like, okay, what is ADHD, because in my mind that wasn't something that I could have, if that makes sense. That wasn't something that I could even accept, I guess is what I'm saying.
It didn't even enter the sphere of your thinking because you're not a lazy person, you're hardworking, you were
Correct.
very involved. And furthermore, it was perceived as an excuse. And, I'd like to stop here because I think this is an important issue that we need to get past. Mental health issues are not an excuse. There are things that often we don't have control over that really impact the quality of life of an individual, how they are able to negotiate and be in relationships, and how they're able to exist in work, in their play, and at home. And so it's something that we have to take very seriously. And I'm glad that you highlighted this issue, this way that we view it. It's not just with ADHD, it's with depression. People just expect people to just get out of it. It's never as simple as that. It's much more complex. So thank you for bringing that to our attention.
Yeah. So given that I didn't, even think about it being a thing, I didn't recognize some of my symptoms, which, okay, I would lose the key to my room almost every other week. Okay, my roommate in college, when I did have, would get frustrated at me, of course, because I would be locked out a lot. And I also, impulsive buying and shopping. I overdrafted a lot. And I know that's a challenge that a lot of people in college have because of the funds, but I didn't necessarily have issues with funds because, you know, my mom is a physician, and my dad also was in business. And so it wasn't that we were struggling financially. It's I was acting I was impulsive in buying, and so I just used to spend a lot. And it's actually something that is very common in people with ADHD. Um, and I mean, explaining my emotions, how I felt about something, that was difficult. I, you know, the longest relationship I had was 6 months, which is very, I mean, when we talk about, I hate the word normal, but generally people have longer relationships than that. But just navigating the communication in those relationships was always a struggle for me. There were also just being able to, again, I talked about this a little bit earlier when I talked about learning styles, and, but organizing myself so that I had strategies for studying, for completing my tasks, for college. I just did not have that structure. It did not exist. And I didn't even know how to begin to think about like that stuff. And so I definitely didn't know my learning style. And so those were some big challenges, and ultimately affected, I graduated, and I didn't fail a class, but I wasn't thriving, I was surviving. Um, yeah, so.
So, what you're saying is not uncommon for individuals who previously were doing really well, who have ADHD undiagnosed, and get to college, the difficulties that you face. So, you had tremendous structure growing up in your home environment. This is scaffolding that you had that protected you and that enabled you to succeed. All of that scaffolding essentially was removed. And ADHD is not simply just the sum of the symptoms that we think of. It's not just simply hyperactivity, inattention, or impulsivity. It's really and what we call in psychiatry an executive thinking issue. And very basically, that is difficulty around organizing yourself, organizing your space, organizing your time, and organizing your emotions. So all of those areas get hit. So, for example, you may underestimate the time it takes to do a task and think it will take much less time than it would take. And then you end up doing it at the very last minute. Or, for example, you don't have sufficient working memory, which means that you can't hold on to something in your mind. And so you might end up misplacing or losing things often. Or the thing that keeps your attention is something that has to be really dynamic and constantly changing. So many individuals will say, well, they don't seem to have ADHD when they're playing a video game. And that's because the video game is really grabbing the person's attention in a way that other activities or tasks don't. And so oftentimes individuals will do well until they are challenged beyond their capacity or beyond the scaffolding in their environment. And so many individuals may get diagnosed in college for the very first time, even though they may have had ADHD symptoms all along, or they may have been disguised by the structure that was in their home environment.
That makes a lot of sense. And when you talk about the scaffolding being gone, I wasn't participating in sports. I wasn't doing any, activity in terms of like with music. I think for me being the creative person that I see I am today, that playing steel pan really contributed to like, an outlet as well, right? And so I think all of that went away. And even the screen time. I mean, I feel like I was binging before we even knew what binging was, right? I remember distinctly binge watching The Game, with Tia Mori, the night before I had an exam. Terrible. And thinking like, oh, okay, I can just watch a couple of episodes and, stayed up all night. Okay. So yeah, when you talk about, the scaffolding, the screen time, nutrition, when you get to college, and you have a meal plan, you're eating everything and like anything that's quick too, right? I had decided that I wanted to be a math major because I was really good with numbers and problem solving. And therefore I was good at math. And I decided, okay, I'm going to be a math major. I didn't really have, I didn't think about what I was going to do with the math major, but I thought that made the most sense, right? And so after my first semester, I got a C in my math class. I went to my advisor and they said that I needed to consider another major because I wouldn't survive if I'm already getting a C in this class. So that being my first experience reaching out for support, I completely wrote off any support at my school, which wasn't necessarily the best, right? But I didn't understand the dynamics that was going into that conversation that we had, and that I could seek support that didn't mimic that dynamic. For instance, there was an Office of Multicultural support on our campus, but I didn't understand why that person told me that, and so I just thought it was the school, right? And I never really looked to the school for support after that.
Yeah, I'm really sorry to hear that happened to you, because really that approach, as far as I'm concerned, is not appropriate. There ought to be some curiosity, some inquiry into what's going on, and what might be different in this environment when we compare it to the one that you were in previously. You're performing so well academically. What has changed? You were good with numbers before. What's happening now? And I am confident that your experience, unfortunately, is not unique. And so I'm glad to hear that you're saying that even if you're in a situation where something doesn't feel good with one person, there might be other individuals on campus who might be more supportive, or who might be able to ally, you might be able to ally with and get the support that you need, because you do deserve it, if you're in a college situation.
I have a friend actually who graduated from Harvard Medical School, who her advisor told her that she shouldn't even consider medicine, that she wouldn't, her grades, mind you, I don't think she had one C, but her grades weren't, and she was very studious, biology major, did research in cancer while we were in school, was part of the student government, joined a sorority, very, active, caring person, and was discouraged from even applying to medical school, and it ended up, at Harvard. So she's an example of someone who, not that, she didn't allow that to deter her from continuing on and seeking other supports as well. So you're right about it not being, later in life, my dad actually told me, something similar happened to him. And so it's a very common experience for African Americans, Afro-Caribbean, people of color to experience when they go to college, unfortunately.
It's so disheartening to me to hear that, yeah, people can't be seen for who they are and what they can bring, the potential that they have. You said that there was the Office of Multicultural Affairs, and in many institutions, there's also a mental health clinic or center that can provide counseling, or medication for individual students. These are undergraduate and graduate students who might have the need for that. So that's something that I would suggest that you explore, especially if you're coming to the States as an international student and you may not have access to insurance outside of the school system. So if the school has that built in, it's helpful in the event that you have some need for that support. That is something that you should consider. Now, I have another way to ask the question. You've talked about some of the negative impacts ADHD had on your life. I'm wondering, has it impacted you in any positive way?
Yeah, I think it's the source of some of my creative endeavors. And so even like I love anything that like I can touch or like do with my hands, like work with my hands. That keeps my mind, from, or it allows sometimes my mind to like race on its own, right? But I'm actually like doing something. So it gives me like a structured time where my mind is like, doing something in the background. And, so when I do need to focus and sit and do something, I'm able to a little bit better, right? And as a result of that, I have like painted some really cool things. I've knitted some hats, and I learned things like really quickly, right? So I've been making flyers for like I don't know how long. And, I do attribute some of that creativity to my ADHD. Um, Also, there's this hyper focus thing that comes with having ADHD that I think while sometimes, people look at it as a negative thing because like you kind of shut out the world, but I use it to kind of do all, like I'm able, products from my hyper focus moments are just like, I'm able to do a lot. Like I'll even, sometimes I like to write a little bit. And so I could write like, 4 or 5 pages of, stuff that is actually pretty good material, from a hyper focus moment, or even scheduling my Instagram post for my wellness retreat. It's like in my hyper focus moment, I could have scheduled a month of posts and that works, because now I've freed up some other time during the month. And so just using those those things that we might see as weaknesses as strengths, right? And allowing those to also guide kind of where like for instance guide our future path, I would say, right? Because for instance I love traveling, right? Something, and that my ADHD mind loves that too. It's like the new experiences part of it, like being fed new experiences. um and so instead of fighting that or feeling like upset that like I can't, like it seems like I can't stick with something, or it seems like I can't, dedicate my focused attention to this one type of thing. Well, I can do a lot of different things and it still be something that, is received well in the world, right?